The existence of a final challenge episode in any given BFDI season has been pretty under-recognized, simply because there hasn't been that many. We only just recently got the third final challenge episode, but even if there were more of them, the fact that the final challenge isn't the finale, nor does it lead to the final vote, has caused the previous iterations of the final challenge to not be brought up as often as you may expect. However, with the release of BFDIA 23, the previous final challenge episodes have become pretty interesting to reflect on to see how this new episode kickflips off the groundwork they built. From its style, pacing, plot developments, and climax, BFDIA 23 is easily the best of this penultimate trio in my eyes, so let's take a look at why that is. I'll be delving into the previous two final challenge episodes before focusing on where this new one shines and where it could be expanded on even further to show how BFDIA refines its final challenge. Our starting spot is an episode from 14 years ago, being BFDI 23. And while there really isn't that much to look at, it is neat to see where the final challenge got its start. The episode begins with some small bits building off BFDI 22, before the announcer comes back and Spongy gets eliminated in a very fun, but not very surprising cake at stake that leaves us with a final four raring to compete in the final challenge. That challenge simply being all the previous challenges in a row. Now, considering there are only 6 minutes left in the episode, and 22 challenges to get through, we gotta crank it up to 2 times speed, so we end up with a highlight reel that contains some interactions between the final four, and a fight between Leafy and Bubble before Bubble wins immunity. Because this contest goes by so quickly though, this iteration of the final challenge feels more like the framework of a really good idea, rather than one fully constructed. It still works well and is commendable as an OG BFDI episode, but because it's an OG BFDI episode, I legit have nothing else to add. All that matters are the challenge blueprints it plots, so let's just chart our way into the next one with BFB 28. Alright, this episode has a lot more plot stuff going on, as it starts with the announcer coming back and trying to take over the hosting role of BFB. My words may be familiar if you're a purple face analysis enjoyer, because the announcer flames 4NX about how poorly they've hosted the show, with the whole 40 contestants leaving and multiple intrusive characters issues. Because 4 is unable to get rid of the announcer, he's forced to realize that he's lost control of the game he started, and begins to spiral. Now, a lot can be said about how 4's character progression between pre- and post-split BFB is quite inconsistent, but when looking at this scene on its own, I think it functions okay enough as a way of raising the stakes of the season. I mean, 4 literally changes the landscape of the game from Dune Yellow to Avatar Blue as he sinks into the ground despite the announcer's takeover, which creates a really cool backdrop for these last 3 episodes. Speaking of last 3, we then have an elimination where Leafy gets out in another fun but unsurprising cake at stake that leaves us with our last 3 competitors who are yet again raring to do all the previous challenges in a row. The basic setup is the exact same, but we do get one big improvement here with how all the eliminated characters help with some of the challenges. It adds a good bit of spice, which is definitely needed because the individual motivations of Flower, Gelatin, and Teardrop, along with their group dynamics, aren't really focused on here. They're just going through the motions of the challenge, which feels like a missed opportunity since all 3 of them have different journeys and established connections between each other, and this episode doesn't explore them beyond a surface level. That lack of attention is likely because the challenge needs to wrap up in 10 minutes, so any character stuff we do get is super basic, with things like Flower being mad at Teardrop, or Gelatin and Teardrop being friends. Aside from that problem, I also got a rag on the climax in the oven. It ends up being won by Flower, and while it being her 3rd merge immunity is a tad underwhelming, The main issue is how the whole setup is super anticlimactic, even compared to BFDI 23. There's no air of finality to her winning by accidentally knocking over Gelatin and Teardrop's ladders, which combines with that lack of character exploration problem to make an episode that still works and is honestly one of the better post-split episodes IMO. But that's mostly because of the inherent challenge structure and fun moments with those eliminated characters. Regardless of the episode quality though, the fact that the only real change made to the formula was the positive of having the eliminated characters help out meant that there was clearly more room to grow with this concept. For example, there could maybe be a fresh setup that still includes all the previous challenges, some more interesting dynamics between the final three explored in the episode itself, a bigger role for the eliminated characters, or even a better climax. Say, all these tune-ups are sounding a bit familiar. And not to lean too heavily on glazing, but BFDIA's take on the final challenge is able to do all of those things. So with that, let's get into our main topic. We open with Woody fleeing with a piece of Dream Island by making a glass bridge before we have a pre-elimination interlude that builds off the tension from last episode. Now, for a fairer comparison, I'm not going to go into detail about how BFDIA 21 and 22 prop up this episode by already creating some big links between the final four, but it is important to say that the remaining BFDIAers already have a leg up on the OGers and the BFBers in terms of their general connections and how those connections are shown. Before I get into specifics though, I gotta talk about who just misses out on the final challenge, as Coiny is eliminated in a pretty surprising outcome. Like, personally, I figured it would be between him and Needle, but the string of bottom twos Needle faced against Pencil and Nickel made me think she was in more danger. So Coiny leaving here, after being a frontrunner for so long, definitely contributes to the memorability of this episode, for better or for worse. I mean, this was the final four after all, so any elimination is going to cause some discourse, but rather than going deeper into a minefield of opinions that are completely unrelated to the final challenge, I'm going to wrap up this tangent and move on to the much more pressing topic in how Coiny's departure leaves us with Book, Needle, and Tennis Ball. The final three who each have some unique internal conflicts, while also having good banter with each other, especially in this episode. Needle and Tennis Ball have a beef that's been broiling since BFDIA 18, that's really heated up since BFDIA 22. Book and Needle were former teammates who are friends but still have some competitive friction, and while Book and Tennis Ball weren't too connected most of the season, they did work together in BFDIA 22 and are still able to bounce off each other in an engaging way. They are each playing to win, and when the wheel is spun, we learn the challenge is to step foot on Dream Island, which turns into a hybrid of reaching Woody at the end of the glass bridge, with a DLC pack of all the previous challenges being along the way. This is that fresh setup, and tying each station to who got eliminated each challenge also gives a strong trip down memory lane feel that's way more effective than the randomized order used by BFB. That being said, what truly matters is how this new format is executed, and I'd say it's done mostly well, even if there are some questionable areas, namely with the elephant in the room of how long the episode is. You see, BFDI in general can struggle with its pacing, as can be seen in BFB 28's 10 minutes for 27 challenges, and here we see the opposite problem in leaving 50 minutes for 22 different stations. It's the longest BFDI episode ever, and it can sometimes feel a little bloated. I bring this up now because I think this starting portion of the challenge suffers the most from its length with how we've already seen Donut, Dora, Teardrop, Match, and Puffball host in BFDIA 14. Obviously they should be included, but I think if any portion could be trimmed down a bit, it would be this roughly 14-minute blocky of time near the start. There is still some good stuff here though, as it shows Needle's independence in trying to win, Book and Tennis Ball still being on okay terms, along with some solid interactions between the final three and the first batch of eliminated characters. Nobody is bad here, even if some characters get more attention than others, and my favorite aspect of the episode, as a key element of how BFDIA refined this challenge, comes from how the eliminated characters are used really well in both fun and dramatic ways. Now going through everyone would take way too long, so I'm gonna shine a light on who stood out to me the most, starting with Spongy. He's one of my favorite characters in the whole cast, and I've been left a bit disappointed with how him being dead / on life support prevented him from being involved with the shenanigans of all the eliminated characters. So it was great to see him get a bigger role in his temporary team up with Book on the beach, highway, and tower. I just really like the unbothered way Spongy's been written recently, and I hope he continues to get more spotlight in the future. Next up, I'd say Nickel and Pin are in a similar boat to Spongy with how they're both used effectively for comedy, while also having some larger impacts on the episode. Pin's brief talk with Book about how she keeps working against herself by being charitable especially stands out by showing what makes Book unique. She's still motivated to win, despite her string of close losses, yet isn't willing to play viciously like Tennis Ball, Needle, and Pin have throughout the season. Their convo contrasts well with the dramatic talks Tennis Ball and Needle have before this, that I will shortly get into, and I think the way Pin is trying to be nice by telling Book she needs to be less nice is a fun contradiction that makes sense considering everything that went down with her in episodes 21 and 22. Now, as for those serious conversations, I'll start with the TB and GB one, since their discussion happens first. You see, Golf Ball's upset at Tennis Ball and doesn't want him to win anymore because of his reliance on malicious tactics rather than inventing that started a few episodes back. It's a disdain that was kind of foreshadowed in BFDIA 19, but I think it could feel more natural. I mean, Golf Ball's no saint either, with how misguided her view of leadership was, until later in Teapot, so the whole moral dilemma part of Golf Ball shaming Tennis Ball's mad villainy feels a little forced. I do like the effects of her disapproval though, as she gets Tennis Ball to doubt how he's been playing. He still wants to win, but he also wants to be seen in a positive light by Golf Ball, and starts to shift his mindset by using more inventions, along with trying to get validation that he's not a bad guy, from Ruby and Fries. Again, I think the ground his uncertainty is built on could be stronger, but it does still make him an interesting member of the final three, along with his usual good comedy. On to the second one now. Needle's talk with Pencil is literally 5 minutes after the Tennis Ball and Golf Ball chat, and it's about her focusing on winning without getting help from anyone else. Pencil plainly and ironically tells her that going solo, especially when the challenge is built around getting helpful rewards from other people, is just stubborn. Needle pushes back with how she doesn't want to be overshadowed by anyone else, to which Pencil says that it'd be hella lonely to push everyone away. And hey, maybe I'm time traveling, cause there's someone else I think those words would really help out. It's a talk that functions as a two-way street, and how seeing Needle's win for myself goal be challenged in a way that makes her more well-rounded is neat, while also creating some early anticipation for what the hell happened to cause Pencil's massive heel turn from now to BFB. All three scenes do what BFB 28 was unable to do, exploring each of the final three by showing their drives to win, while also questioning their motivations and building their stories to make any one of them feel deserving of a seat in the final two. However, one seat is already claimed by the end of the episode, so let's talk about how this challenge delivers on its climax. Because the end goal isn't to claim territory like last episode, we're able to get a new, tense, and visually gorgeous final clash for the piece of Dream Island where Coiny shatters the glass bridge and Book claims immunity after a season of choking right at the end. It may be a little predictable, but it's also a W that's been properly built up, and personally I think her bonds with Needle and Tennis Ball are enough to make either final two combination we end up with a satisfying one. Her victory spells the end of this final challenge episode, so now let's move on by reviewing what this final challenge brings to the table to see where those strengths can be applied in the future. Thanks to the revamped format and expanded focus on the eliminated and competing characters, along with a cool climax, BFDIA 23 to me stands as a really great episode that only suffers from its long runtime. It fully constructs and expands on those old blueprints that BFB 28 minimally changed to its detriment. It sets a high bar for the inevitable Teapot final challenge that'll have some tougher factors to consider, namely in how high the stakes are in some of these regular challenges. Like BFDIA is really good at taking a simple idea and taking it to the extreme, while Teapot is dealing with the apocalypse every weekend. Scaling some challenges back is a must, and it also helps with that runtime issue. If 10 minutes is too short, and 50 minutes is too long, then that middle sweet spot of half an hour to me feels like the right amount of time to have great character stuff with whoever's competing and eliminated. That only leaves what kind of new structure the challenge could have, and while that's straight up impossible to predict right now, I think taking a Teapot 16 approach and having meaningful interactions during the main challenge would be a smart move to add further refinements and excitement to the final challenge in the future. Keywords there are further refinements, because while more certainly can be done, I don't mean to undercut how well executed I think BFDIA's final challenge was. To me, it's easily the best episode of the bunch, thanks to all those praises I've continuously harped on about. Honestly, it feels more cinematic than Teapot 20, an episode I still quite like, even if time has caused its own pacing and formatting problems to become a bit more visible. Nevertheless, because of the refinements BFDIA made to the ground laid by BFDI almost a decade ago, this episode leaves me content and interested in how the final challenge can soar to even greater heights. That's all I gotta say. If you haven't, please subscribe, like, hype, share, hit that bell, comment if you have any thoughts, and thank you for watching.